The Gunlance is pretty much the Lance's younger but much more action-packed brother. Both weapons carry a large shield and a lengthy pokey rod. However, as the name implies, the Gunlance is outfitted with a gun at the end that can fire special ammo referred to as shells. It doesn't really shoot bullets like a bowgun, rather it fires a short-range blast. It's a slow-attacking weapon compared to the Lance, but it carries the strongest shield in the game, being able to withstand anything that its older brother can. So ensure that barrel is loaded, and that thrusting rod is ready for a blast, as we gotta be able to wyvern fire our way through this episode of Weapons Through the Generations, starting with Monster Hunter 2 Dose up to the Iceborne expansion, to find out how this explosive boomstick rose through the ranks to become a fitting rival for the Lance. Starting off its legacy in Monster Hunter 2 Dose, the Gunlance was introduced to be an expansion on the regular Lance, sacrificing its running charge for a more grounded shelling mechanic. If the Lance is an impenetrable fortress, then the Gunlance is an armored tank, capable of destroying a monster's defenses with its pokes and shells while shrugging off any attacks with its strong shield. When the Gunlance unsheathes, the hunter does a running jab with the Gunlance. This can be used as a great gap closer or a last-minute attempt to get away from an attack. This can also be performed by moving then pressing the analog input. Plus, it has a bit of super armor on top of being a great combo starter. Like the Lance, the Gunlance can perform 3 pokes in the air or in front of them. Moving the right analog stick up will do up to 3 forward pokes with each input. Unlike the Lance, the Gunlance's stronger pokes are the forward attacks. Moving the analog down will instead swing the Gunlance upwards, and then with 2 up inputs finish the combo. Generally not good for damage, but it provides good reach for flying wyverns. There is also a shortcut that can be performed here. Pressing down, up, and then R1, the hunter will quickly pull up their shield, and any of these noted pokes can be combined into a combo if so desired. On the topic of shielding, pressing R1 would put up the Gunlance's shield. It's also possible to unsheath into a guard. Like the Lance, the hunter's stamina is paused while stationary. Moving with the shield up will have your stamina be restored. Moving the analog stick up or down while guarding will do a poke from behind the shield. Up to 3 pokes can be done in a combo. Like the Lance's guard poke, this does relatively low damage, but is safe and a quick forward jab. For the keen-eyed viewers, you would have noticed the big difference between the Lance and the Gunlance is the cannon or gun-like detail on the weapon. Pressing R3 would fire a shell. This can be performed at any point of the combo. These shells do fixed damage and come in 3 different forms. Normal shells have the most ammo. At 5 shells each, the fire does the least amount of damage on the trio. Scatter, or better known as long, comes in 3 shells and is typically the best for firing in between pokes to lengthen the combo. Spread ammo, aka wide ammo, has a whopping 2 shells but does the most damage per shell. The Gunlance is able to fire as many shots as its sharpness will handle, as shelling destroys sharpness. Traditionally, all Monster Hunter games has the shell level upgrade alongside with the weapon. For high rank only games, the average level is around 3 or 4ish, while G rank games have at least level 5 shells. The magnum opus for the Gunlance. Doing a combination of R1 and R3 will prep the Gunlance's most powerful attack, the Wyvern Fire. It takes time to execute, but the end result will have a sizable explosion erupt out of the tip of your lance. After that, the Wyvern Fire goes on cooldown. You'll know when the Gunlance can be fired once more when the tip stops smoking, or sometimes a little detail on the Gunlance reverts back to normal. If needed, the hunter can move slightly to the left or right during the charge-up. The shell's level impacts damage as an added bonus for late-game lances. This attack technically does 4 powerful hits in a single attack, so it's not an excellent wake-up attack, but it's quite flashy nonetheless. Both the Wyvern Fire and shells ignore the strength of the monster's hide, but they will stop working if the sharpness goes to red. For guard lancers, being able to block attacks is something of importance. Like the lance, guard +2 is recommended in order to shrug off most attacks. For those attacks that can't be shrugged off, guard up is a very situational skill but may save a card or two in a pinch. Of course, evade lancers would rather go for evade skills. Like its brother, the Gunlance can hop back, but only once. At least the Gunlance can still sidestep to avoid attacks. Plus, they can hop a little further naturally by holding down the analog when hopping to make the most out of the distance traveled. Having these skills would only naturally improve the chances of avoiding attacks completely. Poking, shelling, and wyvern firing just deletes the Gunlance's sharpness gauge, so both sharpness +1 and razor sharp are must-haves for the Gunlance. They are as important as guard skills. ESP, aka Mind's Eye, is also a very useful skill, as bouncing is a very annoying thing for the Gunlance. But at worst, the Gunlance can just shell a monster down if they can't really poke them. Load Up adds in an extra shell to the Gunlance. It's okay in 2nd gen, making shell spamming a more common thing, but this skill becomes more useful in 3rd gen and later. Gunnery not only powers up the ballista and cannon fire, but it also powers up the Gunlance's shells and wyvern fire. Plus 10 of the skill gives a 10% boost in shelling and wyvern fire, plus 15 gives a 20% boost while also lowering the cooldown for wyvern fire to 90 seconds. While not as important as the guard or gunnery armor skills, if your set has a bit of wiggle room for attack or affinity, it is an added benefit. The Gunlance disappeared in Monster Hunter Tri, but came back better than ever in Portable 3rd and 3 Ultimate. An odd feature that was in Portable 3rd was its interesting interaction with fast reload. After firing a shell, trying to instantly fire again would do a quick reload. This would reload a single shell that can continue the shelling combo infinitely until the Gunlance's sharpness gets too low. In Portable 3rd, equipping the +10 Auto Guard charm and doing a fast reload will do a guard point. This is more of a glitch than anything, but this feature gives the Gunlance a lot of blocking capabilities that can outclass the Lance's counter in some situations. The 3rd poke has been upgraded to an overhead slam with the Gunlance. This attack is very powerful and makes for a good wake-up move if there aren't any greatsword users around. After the slam, the hunter has the option to fire all their loaded shells by pressing A. Normal shells are the best type of shell for the full burst for not only having the most potential damage with its 5 shells, 6 with load up, but they also get a 10% multiplier in damage. Long doesn't get a bonus, with spread getting the short end of the lance as they get a 10% damage loss when full bursting. Fast reloading and then pressing X is a handy shortcut for the slam, so you don't always need to poke twice before the attack. Instead of doing a full burst, it's also possible to press X plus A to do a wyvern fire. Like before, mixing pokes can be a handy option, so if you don't want to slam, you can instead press X plus A after the first 2 X inputs. When firing a shell, pressing R and A at the same time will charge the shell so that it will do 20% extra damage. Spread shots are a go-to for charge shots as they get a hefty 45% boost in damage. Note that the wider explosion can be a very annoying thing for teammates next to the blast. The charge shells can be chained by timing out the presses, or by charging a shell, fast reloading, and then charging the next shot. With normal shots being the best for full burst, spread for charged, where does that leave long shells? For wyvern fire. Long shells are in the middle when it comes to charged and full burst damage. It's mainly for a balanced playstyle of shelling and stabbing, but it does get a 20% boost in damage for wyvern fire, and it makes its effective range a little longer. In a similar vein to the Lance's shield advance, the Gunlance obtained a new option for closing the gap between the hunter and the monster. Instead of rushing in, the hunter can instead press A while blocking and moving the analog forward to do a quick advance that also fires a shell. However, the best part about this is that it doesn't consume any stamina like the Lance's shield advance. A notable downside is that you're not completely protected during this advance, but the shield goes back up relatively quickly. With careful timing, you can also do a charge shot instead of a regular shell when advancing. Shell advancing off a ledge will do a small hop, then a shell will be fired. Pressing X afterwards will do a heavy aerial slam. After the slam, the full burst or wyvern's fire are options to the player. This can also be performed from an unsheath by pressing R, X, and A. If there isn't much breathing space for a slam, Pressing X will do a simple aerial poke. 4 Ultimate added in an extra tier to artillery. At 20 points, it lowers the Wyvern Fire cooldown to 80 seconds and buffs shelling by 30%. Another parallel to the Lance, the Gunlance got an odd addition in Gen/Gen U. In the top left corner where the shells would normally be, there is now a heat gauge. At stock, the Gunlance is yellow, which is full damage. Shooting shells would bring the heat gauge up, and poking with the Gunlance will bring the gauge down slightly. Bringing it up to orange will give the Gunlance a 15% boost in damage, and in red, 20%. Going too far will overheat the gauge and would have it stuck at the far left. Plus, Wyvern Fire would be on cooldown. Wyvern firing normally would bring the heat gauge down and would lock the gauge for the Wyvern Fire's cooldown period. So the best option is to bring the Gunlance to almost overheating, then Wyvern firing to keep the heat gauge at the red for the most amount of damage. As an added bonus, artillery gives a bonus for the heat gauge. Plus 10 will have the heat gauge lower at half the rate, with plus 15 reducing it by 2/3. This also goes for the Wyvern Fire kickbacks. Striker Style removes the heavy slam and, by extension, the full burst. Even the aerial slam is removed, so the Gunlance is just how it was in Freedom Unite and before, aside from the heat gauge and the charge shells, of course. This style is better for wide and long type shells. Plus, a Wyvern Fire can still be comboed at the end of the third poke. Aerial Style keeps the third poke but returns the aerial slam. The Gunlance no longer hops backward, but now can do the aerial vault when hopping forward. Jumping off a monster and pressing A will fire a shell, and then X will do a heavy slam. The hunter can go straight into the heavy slam by pressing X. If they don't want to do a full burst upon landing, they can start their pokes on the ground and then reset by hopping on the monster again or to the side. Note that the Gunlance will reload a shell when vaulting. Adept Style doesn't have a quick reload, but pressing R will do an Adept Guard. If the hunter gets hit while they waggle their shield, they will do a powerful upward swing and then a strong slam that auto-reloads all the Gunlance's shells. This style caters towards the full burst combo, pretty much. Alchemy Style doesn't allow charge shelling and the upward swing while comboing. The Wyvern Fire damage is halved, but so is the charge up and the cooldown duration, so this style would benefit the most from long shells. Valor Style changes the reload to be a quick reload with R+A. This also comes with a guard point that can even be used when the Gunlance is fully reloaded. Tapping Y and pressing X will do an upward thrust that reloads a shell, giving the option to do a slam afterwards. Tapping A would quickly fire off a shell. This is a great way to build up Valor gauge. You can also do a full reload by pressing R+A while in the Valor Sheath animation. And most importantly of all, pressing X+A will do a Wyvern's Fire. When in Valor mode, the X combos are now infinite and the quick reload now reloads 4 shots for normal, 3 for long, and 2 for wide. The slam can also be performed after a quick reload as opposed to doing the upward poke first. So this is perfect for normal shells since full burst would do 75% extra damage with 5 shells. Firing regularly will quickly ramp up the speed and damage of the subsequent shell. The second shell gets a 20% boost, then 60, then 100, then 160. This is why Wyvern's Fire is very important with Valor, since the style makes it very easy for the Gunlance to overheat. Speaking of Wyvern Fire, that is also impacted by the amount of shells that are currently loaded, with up to 6 shells giving us 60% damage increase towards it. A secret technique that's a stronger Wyvern Fire that doesn't use up any heat. The first hit does the most damage, with every subsequent hit afterwards just piling up the damage. The attack is much stronger in Gen U, with the amount of true damage being based off the Gunlance's raw attack. Higher levels have the true damage multiplied even further. A pretty fun hunter art that blasts the hunter forward with the Gunlance. At level 3, pressing X while mid-air will do a slam that does a mounting strike, with the option to do a full burst. The higher level the hunting art, the further the hunter can launch themselves. After a short charge, the Gunlance is kept at a dangerously high temperature, adding 10 power and fire damage to the shells. This starts at 60 seconds at level 1 and goes up to 180 at level 3. Just don't tell the Smithy about this, he already knows and he's not too happy about it. As its name entails, the anti-air flares will bring any flying wyvern back to the ground in a single input. The start has a guard point reload that goes into an aerial full burst and then an upwards wyvern fire if it's up, ending off with another guard point reload. The full burst adds heat while the wyvern fire lowers it. Plus, it provides a handy 3x part breaker for flying wyverns. Level 3 gives a 10% boost in damage and lowers the wyvern fire cooldown down to 30 seconds. Monster Hunter World changed some things up for the Gunlance. The first notable change is the ability to do 2 hops in any direction now, even forward. This goes for the side steps as well as after attacks. Second, the Gunlance Slam is no longer in the triple poke combo. This is changed to be a triangle follow-up move after the Rising Slash. This can also be performed after a rushing stab and pressing triangle plus circle. Third, while normal shells are still excellent for full burst, long and wide shells switched roles. Long shells now get a 120% boost in damage when holding down the circle button, normal shells get a 60% boost, and wide with a 40%. Wide, now known as spread, gets a nice 5% raw bonus when wyvern firing. Sadly, the wyvern fire loses a hit, plus all the shell types lost a fair amount of true damage, but at least now all the shells are reloaded when performing a fast reload. After a Gunlance Slam, pressing triangle once more will do a very powerful sweep with the Gunlance. This is the strongest single-hit move that the Gunlance has, so use this when waking up monsters. This move, along with the upswing, are crucial for 2 of the infinite combos. Pressing circle twice will fire 2 shells, and with a third circle input, the hunter will do a worm-stake cannon shot. This pierces into the monster's hide, doing a bit of extra damage before exploding. This will end the combo. Other ways of performing this is by pressing triangle after a wide sweep and then pressing circle after a full burst. Once fired, the Gunlance would need to do a full reload to fire another one. Like the wyvern fire, the worm stake's damage is based on the shell level. When sliding, pressing triangle once will do an upward slash, and then pressing it once more will do a forward poke. Upon landing, the hunter can do the rest of their desired combos. Pressing circle as the second input will do a burst with the shells mid-air. In danger, the hunter can raise their shield with R2. In order to slide with the weapon out, the hunter would need to do a rushing slash on slidable terrain. Running off a wall will do a simple poke, but doing a rushing slash will do the heavy slam attack mid-air instead. Latching onto a monster with the clutch claw and then pressing triangle will have the monster drop slinger ammo after firing a shell. By pressing L2 with triangle and circle, or by attacking by pressing L2 and circle, the wormstake blast will be loaded. This takes up all the slinger ammo, but now when doing the wormstake cannon, an odd explosive device will be lodged into the monster. Shelling or wyvern firing this device will prompt an extra explosion that does more damage. Coming from regular weapons that would roll to the Gunlance, and even the regular lance for that matter, really makes the weapons seem clunky. The animations are pretty long for some of the stronger moves, and it makes the weapon feel unforgiving sometimes when trying to attack. But the Gunlance is on the more technical side compared to the other weapons we've covered. With careful use, it is one of the most powerful Blade Master weapons. World helps out with the slight hop forward as an option to reposition. The quick reload that refills all the shells may feel a bit overtuned, but having the extra option for infinite combos is a good and welcome change to keep the big numbers going. However, it kind of feels that the Gunlance is better suited to those that are evade lancers. The absence of any counters or guard points aside from Generations Ultimate's Adept or Valor styles has the hops be an excellent manner of evasion and restarting combos. However, don't take this as a disregard of the Gunlance's shield. It is a very powerful asset in hunts, as when paired with the shells and wyvern fire, it can dish out as much damage as it can receive. The Gunlance is a near unstoppable tank, providing firepower and style while being mobile. In all, the Gunlance is a super rewarding weapon. There's a great sense of satisfaction when you blast a wyvern out of the air, when you wake up a sleeping monster with a slam, or even timing out the wyvern fire to trip over a monster. While waiting for the next episode on the Switch Axe, give the Gunlance a try. I'm sure it won't disappoint you when bursting and slamming monsters becomes second nature. Until the next episode. Oh hey, it's me, Loomber Guy, back at it again, narrating this video. Yeah, so first of all, I want to say thanks to Jojo Josie for giving me the opportunity to narrate this. Always appreciate that. I always, liked the Gunlance. I'm terrible without a script, honestly. I'm trying to say, I really like the Gunlance. I'm glad that I can narrate this, and if you want to watch me, you can find me at twitch.tv/Loomber. That's twitch.tv/Loomber. I play video games. I can't guarantee there will be Monster Hunter, but yeah, if you want to see me being a dingus without a script, then by all means, head over there. And if not, that's fine too. But make sure you sub to Jojo Josie so you can get up to date with all of your weapons through the generation needs. Anyway, I think that's enough selling out for me because I'm terrible at this. So yeah, hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, okay, bye.